You've been showing up for everyone. Always. But when was the last time someone asked if you were okay without needing something in return? There you sit, in the quiet of another sleepless night, feeling the weight of everyone else's expectations pressing down on your chest like stones. You've become the emergency button in everyone's chaos, the reliable one, the one who always says yes when the world demands more from you than you have to give. And somewhere in the silence between your heartbeats, you wonder when you became so obedient. Niccolo Machiavelli once wrote about two natures that exist within every human soul, the dog and the wolf. The dog, loyal and trusting, believes that goodness will be rewarded, that kindness will be returned, that showing your throat to the world will somehow protect you. But the wolf knows better. The wolf understands that survival requires teeth, that respect is earned through strength, not through endless giving. You've been living as the dog for so long that you've forgotten the wolf even exists within you. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth lies in your usefulness to others, that love is earned through constant availability, that peace comes from avoiding conflict at all costs. But tonight, in this sacred darkness where truth lives, we're going to examine the cost of your obedience. The dog in you wags its tail when others approach, even when they come with empty hands and hungry eyes. It believes that if you're good enough, gentle enough, giving enough, somehow the world will notice and reward your faithfulness. But look around you. Look at how they treat the dogs fed just enough to keep them loyal, petted just enough to keep them hopeful, but never truly respected, never truly valued beyond their utility. You've been trained to seek approval like a dog seeks treats, to modify your behavior based on other people's reactions, to measure your worth by their satisfaction. And in this endless performance of goodness, you've lost something vital, the very essence of who you are when no one is watching, when no one is asking, when no one needs anything from you. The exhaustion you feel isn't just tiredness. It's your soul crying out against this domestication of your spirit. It's the wolf within you, caged and hungry, pacing behind the bars of your conditioning, knowing that you were meant for something far greater than this perpetual state of servitude disguised as love. Carl Jung understood something profound about human relationships. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. But what Jung didn't say, what he left for you to discover in the darkness of your own awakening, is that most people's irritation with you isn't about who you are. It's about who you refuse to be for them. They've grown dependent on your reactions, your presence, your emotional energy in ways that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. When they say they care about you, what they often mean is they care about what you do for them, how you make them feel, how you solve their problems and absorb their chaos. You've become their emotional garbage disposal, their unpaid therapist, their constant source of validation and reassurance. But here's the truth that will cut through the illusion. Like Machiavelli's blade, most of your relationships are not rooted in connection. They're rooted in convenience. You are convenient. Your predictable responses are convenient. Your willingness to sacrifice your own needs for theirs is convenient. Your inability to say no, to set boundaries, to demand reciprocity, it's all beautifully convenient for everyone except you. They've learned to pull your strings like a master puppeteer, knowing exactly which words will make you feel guilty, which silence will make you anxious, which crisis will bring you running. And you've been such a good dog, haven't you? Always coming when called, always grateful for the smallest scraps of attention, always believing that if you just try harder, love deeper, give more, somehow you'll earn the respect and genuine care you crave. But Machiavelli knew something about power that your gentle heart has been too naive to understand. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. He wasn't speaking of cruelty, he was speaking of respect. When you make yourself endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, endlessly understanding, you teach people that your time has no value, your energy has no limit, Your soul has no price. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to be acceptable to others. But your persona has become a prison, hasn't it? You've become so skilled at being who others need you to be that you've forgotten who you actually are underneath all that desperate people-pleasing. The dog has been trained so well that it no longer remembers it was once wild. The people in your life have become addicted to your emotional labor, your constant availability, your predictable reactions. They depend on your anger to feel important, your worry to feel cared for, your guilt to feel powerful. They've created an ecosystem of emotional dependency where you are the sun, and they are the planets orbiting around your energy, your attention, your endless capacity to absorb their darkness. But addiction is still addiction, even when it's disguised as love. And like any drug dealer, they will become angry, manipulative, even vicious when you threaten to cut off their supply. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." And there you are, commanded by everyone else's needs, everyone else's emotions, everyone else's crisis, because you never learned to command yourself. You never learned to say no with the quiet confidence of someone who understands their own worth. You never learned that your energy is precious, that your attention is a gift, that your presence is not a birthright that others can claim whenever they please. But tonight, something is stirring within you. It's not anger. Anger is still reactive, still giving others power over your internal state. What's stirring is something far more dangerous to those who have grown comfortable feeding off your compliance. It's detachment. It's the slow, deliberate withdrawal of your emotional investment in their dramas, their opinions, their desperate attempts to pull you back into the dance of dysfunction you've been performing for so long. Jung spoke of psychic energy as a finite resource that we either invest wisely or squander carelessly. For years, you've been hemorrhaging this energy through constant reactivity, explaining yourself to people who weren't listening, defending your choices to people who never supported them, seeking understanding from people who were never trying to understand. You've been casting your pearls before swine, as the ancient saying goes, not realizing that your pearls were never meant for everyone. The wolf understands something the dog never could. Silence is not emptiness, it's fullness. It's the fullness of knowing who you are without needing external validation. It's the fullness of keeping your energy for yourself instead of scattering it like breadcrumbs for every hungry ego that crosses your path. It's the fullness of presence without performance, of being without proving. When you stop reacting to their provocations, when you stop explaining your decisions, when you stop justifying your boundaries, something miraculous happens. The power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they have to work for your attention instead of demanding it. They have to earn your emotional investment instead of taking it for granted. They have to respect your autonomy instead of assuming your compliance. This isn't about becoming cold or cruel. It's about becoming sovereign. It's about reclaiming the throne of your own life that you've been letting others occupy for far too long. It's about understanding that your emotional reactions are not automatic responses to other people's behavior. They're choices, and you can choose differently. Machiavelli understood that perceived distance creates mystery, and mystery creates power. When you're always available, always predictable, always eager to please, you become common. But when you withdraw your automatic compliance, when you become selective with your energy, when you refuse to dance to every tune they play, you become rare. And rare things are valued differently than common things. The psychology of withdrawal is not about punishment, it's about self-preservation. It's about finally understanding that you don't owe anyone your emotional labor, your constant availability, your endless patience with their immaturity. There's a silence that comes not from having nothing to say, but from having everything to say and choosing not to waste it on deaf ears. This is the silence of the wolf, deliberate, intentional, powerful. It's the silence that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to fill the void with their own insecurities, their own projections, their own desperate attempts to regain control over your responses. You've spent so many years being the explicable, the justifier, the one who turns yourself inside out, trying to make others understand your perspective, your feelings, your choices. But Machiavelli knew something about human nature that your generous heart struggled to accept. People don't misunderstand you because you haven't explained well enough. They misunderstand you because understanding you doesn't serve their agenda. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to convince people who have already decided not to be convinced, you reclaim something sacred, your energy. Every word you don't waste on closed minds is energy you can invest in your own growth, your own dreams, your own becoming. Every argument you don't engage in is space you create for peace. Every reaction you don't give is power you keep for yourself. The people who have grown accustomed to your endless explanations will be disturbed by your silence. They'll interpret it as anger, as punishment, as some manipulative tactic designed to hurt them. But this says everything about them and nothing about you. They fear your silence because silence takes away their ability to control your emotional state through their words, their accusations, their carefully crafted guilt trips. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." In the context of emotional boundaries, this doesn't mean being cruel or intimidating. It means being so secure in yourself that others know they cannot manipulate you with emotional blackmail, cannot guilt you into compliance, cannot force you to abandon your own well-being to manage their feelings. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their own behavior back to them. Without your reactions to distract them, without your explanations to argue against, without your emotional chaos to feed on, they're forced to confront the emptiness of their own approach to relationships. They're forced to see how little they actually bring to the table when they can't take from yours. But here's what your silence really represents. It represents the death of the dog in you. The dog that barked on command, that performed tricks for scraps of affection, that wagged its tail even when being kicked. Your silence is the wolf's first howl, announcing that the old rules no longer apply, that the old dynamics are no longer acceptable, that you are no longer available to be used and discarded at will. The power of silence is not in its ability to punish others. It's in its ability to free you. Free you from the exhausting cycle of trying to make yourself understood by people who profit from misunderstanding you. Free you from the illusion that your worth depends on their approval. Free you from the cage of constant performance that has kept your authentic self hidden for so long. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he didn't mention the terror that comes with killing who you've always been, even when who you've been was slowly destroying you from the inside out. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with recognizing that the person you've been trying so hard to be, the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who never asks for too much, was never really you at all. It was just a survival strategy you learned, so young you mistook it for your identity. The dog in you is dying, and death is never comfortable, even when it's necessary. You can feel it in the way your stomach turns when you say no without explaining why. You can feel it in the anxiety that rises when you don't immediately respond to messages that once would have sent you running. You can feel it in the strange emptiness where your automatic compliance used to live, like a phantom limb that's been amputated but still seems to ache. Who are you when you're not busy being who everyone else needs you to be? The question sits in your chest like a stone, heavy and unfamiliar. For so long, your identity has been built around your usefulness to others, your ability to anticipate their needs, your willingness to sacrifice your own comfort for their convenience. But now, in the space where your people-pleasing used to live, there's just ... silence. And in that silence, something both terrifying and magnificent is trying to be born. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you actually are, beneath all the roles you've played, all the masks you've worn, all the versions of yourself you've created to earn love, acceptance, belonging. But individuation often begins in solitude, in the uncomfortable space between who you were and who you're becoming, where the old strategies no longer work, but the new ones haven't fully formed yet. The people in your life are confused by this new version of you, the one who doesn't automatically say yes, who doesn't absorb their emotions like a sponge, who doesn't twist themselves into pretzels to avoid conflict. They liked the old you better, the predictable you, the one who made their lives easier by making your own life harder. They're angry at you for changing the rules of the game without asking their permission, for becoming someone they can't control as easily. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your problem to solve. Their anger at your evolution is not your cue to shrink back into the small, accommodating shape they preferred. You are not required to remain small so that others can feel big. You are not required to remain wounded so that others can feel powerful. You are not required to remain the dog so that others can feel like masters. This collapse of your old identity feels like death, because it is death, the death of who you thought you had to be to deserve love. But what's being born in its place is something they never taught you was possible. The version of you that doesn't need to earn love because you are love, doesn't need to perform worth because you are worth, doesn't need to justify your existence because your existence needs no justification. The wolf doesn't ask permission to be wild. It simply is. Nietzsche spoke of the Bermensch not as some superior being, but as the human who has evolved beyond the need for constant external validation, who has learned to walk alone, not because they're antisocial, but because they found something more valuable than the approval of the crowd, their own authentic voice. You are learning to become your own Bermensch, your own evolved self, even though the path feels lonely and the destination uncertain. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with awakening, not the loneliness of being abandoned, but the loneliness of no longer needing to be saved. It's the loneliness of the strong, the ones who have learned to be their own source of comfort, their own source of validation, their own source of peace. It's the loneliness of the wolf who has left the pack not because it was rejected, but because it outgrew the limitations of pack mentality. Your solitude is not punishment, it's sovereignty. It's the sacred space where you remember who you are when you're not performing for an audience, when you're not managing other people's emotions, when you're not constantly monitoring your behavior to ensure it meets someone else's approval. In this solitude, you're not just alone, you're alone with yourself, perhaps for the first time in years. The dog fears solitude because the dog has been conditioned to believe that love comes from outside, that worth is determined by others. That safety lies in belonging to someone, anyone, even if that belonging comes at the cost of your own soul. But the wolf understands that true power comes from within, that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself, that the person whose approval matters most is the one looking back at you from the mirror. This isn't about becoming isolated or antisocial. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every drama deserves your attention. Not every person deserves access to your energy. It's about learning to say, no, thank you, with the calm confidence of someone who knows their worth and refuses to negotiate it downward to accommodate other people's comfort. Like a lion walking away from the herd, not in defeat, but in awakening, you're learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away from situations that require you to be less than who you are, from people who only value you for what you can do for them, from relationships that drain more than they nourish. Your solitude becomes a sanctuary where your authentic self can finally breathe, where your real thoughts can surface without being immediately edited for palatability, where your actual feelings can exist without being dismissed or minimized or explained away. In this sanctuary, you're not lonely, you're finally home. The world will tell you that something is wrong with you for choosing yourself, for setting boundaries, for refusing to be endlessly available to people who were never available to you. But Nietzsche knew the truth. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. You are learning to own yourself. And ownership, true ownership, sometimes requires solitude. Jung understood something profound about the unconscious agreements we make with people. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But what he was really talking about were the invisible contracts you've been signing your whole life, contracts written in fear, signed in desperation, renewed through habit. Contracts that say, I will be who you need me to be, so you won't leave me. I will absorb your emotions, so you won't abandon me. I will sacrifice my own needs, so you won't reject me. These emotional contracts have been directing your life like a puppet master, pulling strings you didn't even know existed. Every time you swallowed your words to avoid conflict, you are honoring a contract. Every time you said yes when you meant no, you are fulfilling terms you never consciously agreed to. Every time you made yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable, you are paying premiums on policies that were never designed to protect you. But contracts can be broken, terms can be renegotiated, and the most powerful renegotiation tool you have is your withdrawal from the old patterns, your refusal to keep signing agreements that bankrupt your soul to fund other people's comfort. Machiavelli understood that emotional manipulation thrives on predictability. When people know exactly how you'll react, exactly which buttons to push, exactly which guilt trips will work, they have all the power in the relationship. But when you become unpredictable, not chaotic, but sovereign, when your responses are no longer automatic, when your compliance is no longer guaranteed, the entire dynamic shifts. You're not just changing your behavior, you're changing the fundamental terms of how people can engage with you. No longer are you the emergency contact for every emotional crisis. No longer are you the dumping ground for every frustration. No longer are you the unpaid therapist for people who are never willing to work on themselves. No longer are you the constant source of validation for people who were never willing to validate you in return. The people who benefited from the old contracts will not be happy about this renegotiation. They'll accuse you of being selfish, cold, changed, not yourself. But what they really mean is that you're not useful to them in the same way anymore. They mean that you're no longer willing to subsidize their emotional immaturity with your own well-being. They mean that you've stopped accepting payment in breadcrumbs for services worth a feast. Breaking these emotional contracts requires something most people don't have: the willingness to be disliked by people whose opinions were never actually in your best interest anyway. It requires the courage to disappoint people who were never truly concerned with your happiness. It requires the strength to walk away from relationships that only worked when you are willing to carry more than your share of the weight. But in breaking these contracts, you're not just freeing yourself from bondage, you're creating space for new agreements, healthier ones, contracts written in mutual respect rather than fear, signed by equals rather than master and servant. You're making room for relationships where your presence is valued, not just your usefulness, where your boundaries are respected, not just your compliance. The old contracts are null and void. The new terms are non-negotiable: respect, reciprocity, and genuine care, or nothing at all. In the deepest hours of night, when the world sleeps and pretenses fall away like old clothes, you can feel it, the stirring of something that was always there, but had been quiet for so long you almost forgot its voice. It's not anger, though anger may have been its messenger. It's not hatred, though disappointment may have been its teacher. It's something far more profound, far more powerful. It's the awakening of your authentic self, the you that exists independent of other people's needs, opinions, or approval. You are being reborn from the silence you chose over the chaos they offered. You are emerging from the cocoon of people-pleasing into something stronger, something more beautiful, something that knows its own worth without needing external confirmation. The dog in you is dying, yes, but what's being born is Magnificent the wolf, the sovereign self, the version of you that was always meant to exist, but was never given permission to emerge. This rebirth is not comfortable. Transformation never is. You're shedding skins you've worn for decades, beliefs about yourself and love and worthiness that were handed to you by people who didn't know better, who were operating from their own wounds, their own fears, their own limitations. You're learning to trust your own instincts after years of being told they were wrong, learning to value your own opinions after years of being taught they don't matter, learning to prioritize your own well-being after years of believing that was selfish. The energy you're reclaiming, the energy you used to spend on managing other people's emotions, explaining your decisions, seeking approval for your choices. It's like finding a hidden reservoir within yourself, a source of power you didn't know existed. This energy is yours to invest in your dreams, your growth, your becoming. This energy is yours to spend on people who actually value it, on relationships that actually nourish you, on activities that actually fulfill you. Machiavelli wrote about the lion and the fox, the lion representing strength and courage, the fox representing cunning and adaptability. But you've learned to embody the wolf, which contains both, the strength to walk away from what doesn't serve you, and the wisdom to know the difference between what's worth fighting for and what's worth releasing. The world begins to shift when you stop reacting and start becoming. People notice when you're no longer available to be manipulated, when your peace can't be disturbed by their chaos, when your worth isn't determined by their validation. Some will respect this evolution, others will resent it. But their reactions are no longer your responsibility, no longer your concern, no longer your problem to solve. You are standing at the threshold of a new way of being, a new way of loving starting with yourself. You are learning that boundaries are not walls built to keep people out, but bridges built to invite the right people in. You are discovering that saying no to what doesn't serve you is the same as saying yes to what does. Who are you when no one is watching? You are power wrapped in tenderness, strength disguised as gentleness, wisdom wearing the mask of simplicity. You are someone who has learned that love without respect is not love at all. That kindness without boundaries is not kindness but enabling. That giving without receiving is not generosity but self-destruction. What part of you is waiting to be heard beneath the noise? It's the part that knows you deserve more than scraps, more than convenience, more than being someone's emotional dumping ground or crisis manager or constant source of free therapy. It's the part that remembers you are whole, complete, worthy exactly as you are, without performance, without explanation, without apology. What would happen if you finally chose yourself fully, completely, without reservation? The world wouldn't end. The sky wouldn't fall. The people who truly love you would celebrate your awakening. And the people who don't, well, their reactions would tell you everything you need to know about the value they actually placed on your well-being. You are the wolf now. Act accordingly.